So syntax is the grammatical structure of a sentence. Can you check if it's being recorded? Okay. Now, so when we form sentences, paragraphs, etc., so we have to look at how we put the words together, how we arrange the word, how we order the words. Right? So depending on that, we can know that given a sequence of words, is it a correct sentence? The second thing is that suppose it is a correct sentence, we want to understand the underlying structure. From this sequence of words that we get, we want to get the underlying structure because that will help us to get the meaning of a sentence. Now, there are different formalisms of syntax, but typically the structure is expressed as a tree structure, but different formalisms express them in different ways. Now, earlier, before we start our discussion on the tree type syntax, we have looked at this structure earlier. For example, in the beginning, we have looked at n-gram models, where we look at which word sequences are more likely, right? So that is a form of structure, which word sequences are more likely. Then, when we talked about part of speech tagging, for example, when we looked at the Markov model, we looked at the structure of which tag sequences are more likely, right? So say given the previous tag, what is the probability of the next tag? So that is one way of looking at the structure of a sentence. However, this sort of bigram or Markov structure is not sufficient to capture the richness of structure in language. And today we will study, in this module, we will study a better capturing of the structure of a language. Now, there are many ways in which people have tried to capture the structure, and two very prominent types of structures. Number one is the constituent structure, as defined by phrase structure grammar or context-free grammar, or different variations and additions, augmentations to context-free grammar. That is the first type. The second type of linguistic theory is based on dependency structure. And we will talk about both these. First, we will talk about constituency structure, then we will talk about dependency structure. Now, first, let us look at the concept of constituency. Now, the idea about constituency is that when, for example, if you look at a sentence, and in that sentence, you have different words which are put together. Now, apart from saying that this sequence of 10 words form a sentence, there is also internal structure in this sentence. For example, syntactic constituents are groups of words that behave as single units. For example, suppose we say the tall girl, or I say Abhishek Mohanty, or I say the tall girl with a telescope. So the girl with long hair, right? The horse running on the course. So what can you say about these different phrases? What can you say? Divyangana. Can you tell me what these sequences of words represent? Say the tall girl with a telescope, the horse running in the course, the silent class. What can you say about these sequences of words? Divyangana, are you there? Angana Mandal. Angana, are you there? So today people are very silent. Yeah.
It is following the grammatical rules.
Huh?
It is following the grammatical rules.
Yes. What type of grammar? But this is not a complete sentence. What do you say of this phrase?
Sorry, ma'am, your voice is not clear. Sorry. Can you repeat?
So when I say a beautiful girl, or
Yes.
girl with a text, or when I say Ayush Surana, right? So each of these, do they have some commonality among them?
The phrases.
Yes, they're phrases, but what sort of commonality do they have? These phrases,
They add more information to the noun.
they are noun phrases. So they are noun phrases, right? So when I say the girl, or I say water is a noun. The girl is a noun, the is the determiner, but the girl, it has similar functions as a noun, right? The horse running on the course, this entire thing is about a noun, denotes a noun. It's called a noun phrase. Why do we distinguish noun phrases? What is it that they have in common?
They act as a single entity.
Single or double, I can say.
They appear in similar context.
Huh?
They appear in similar context.
They appear in similar contexts as is written. Can you for example, can you give an example of a context? Can you give an example of a similar context of a noun phrase? So can you give a sentence with a noun phrase? Suppose you have the girl with the telescope. So can you complete this sentence? Or when I say the tall girl, can you complete the sentence with having the tall girl is a phrase? Can you put this in a sentence?
Ma'am, they occur before verbs. So
give an example of a sentence with the tall girl.
Ma'am, like the tall girl is watching the moon.
The tall girl is watching the movie.
Yes.
Right? Now, can I say, suppose the girl with the telescope. Can I say the girl with the telescope is watching the movie? Can I say?
I mean,
Yes.
it will be grammatically correct, but
what? It's possible, right? Grammatically. Or the horse running on the course is watching the movie. Is it okay?
It's syntactically correct, but not pragmatically.
I'm only talking about syntactically correct. It is possible. It may not be likely pragmatically, but it is a possible sentence, right? So instead of watching the movie, you could have some other action. So when you have a noun phrase, it can come before a verb phrase. Okay? And the nature of the verb phrase, there may be some pragmatics associated with it. Okay. So you can change the word, but it really makes sense. Or you can put a preposition phrase after it. Right? So when I can say with the red coat, you can say the horse running on the course with the red coat, wearing the red coat, or the girl with the telescope wearing the red coat. So I can put similar context around that. So the point is that they have some similarity, and that is where they are called constituents. So they are similar with respect to that. They may have similar internal structure. They are not all same, but if you take all the noun phrases, You can write rules about what type of structures, what are the possible structures that they can have. Secondly, you can look at how they can be positioned with respect to the context, right? For example, noun phrase can precede a verb phrase, or you can say after noun phrase you can postpose a prepositional phrase, and so on. Okay. So in a phrase structure grammar or constituent grammars, we look at making the grammar out of these constituents. We define different constituents, such as we already have the different words and we have the part of speech tags that we have looked at, right? Noun, adjective, verb, pronoun, etc. These are the part of speech tags. Now we can group words into phrases like the tall girl or the cuddly cat. Right? These are examples of noun phrase. There are other phrases like prepositional phrases like by the door, etc. And then we can combine the phrases into bigger phrases recursively. For example, the cuddly cat is a noun phrase. By the door is a prepositional phrase. The cuddly cat by the door is a noun phrase. And you can have similar examples from other languages. And the constituent grammar, the entire sentence, if you take a sentence, it is composed from words. You can get constituents and higher level constituents, and the sentence is also a constituent. So you can you can have a nested constituents to define the sentence. So these are some examples of noun phrases in English. Air, the table, new ideas, 2 million of inhabitants, one small village. Operating system that, regardless of all efforts by your admin, crashes just too often. He. These are all examples of noun phrases, and they can all precede verbs. They can all be preposed or postposed, etc., and so on. And these are some examples from Hindi. Ram ke ve teen kale ghore, mandir ka udghatan. These are examples of noun. We also have adjective phrases. Some examples are old, very old, really very old. 5 times older than the oldest elephant in our zoo. Sure that he will arrive first. These are all adjective phrases, and they have some similarity. Right? They can qualify noun. Then we have adverbial phrases such as quickly, much more, how, louder than you can imagine, yesterday. These are some examples of adverbial phrases, and so on. These are some examples of prepositional phrases in English. In the city center, in God, around 5 o'clock, to a better future, and so on. Then we have clauses and sentences. So a clause is a group of words with one predicate and the arguments of the predicate. For example, John loves Perry, where loves is the predicate. So the verb is the predicate here, and the arguments of the predicate are John and Perry. That, you are right, is not a complete sentence, but it is a clause because there is a verb and the arguments of the verbs are there in the sentence. So a clause, a simple sentence comprises of one clause. A compound or complex sentences can have multiple clauses. A sentence can be simple, which has one clause, or a compound sentence which has more than one clause. For example, after I come, he will leave the house. So these are two different clauses which are put together into one sentence. Or this sentence that we have here, I realized that you were right. Right? So there are two clauses here. That you were right is one clause, and I realized, that takes this clause as an argument. So there are these two clauses. So this is one sentence, one complex sentence. So each sentence will have one main clause, which is independent, right? And then there can be nested clauses or relative clauses. For example, this is the man that I saw. This is the man, this is the main clause. That I saw is the relative clause. And there can be two main clauses. For example, if I say, after I come, you can leave the house. This is a coordinated or compound sentence with two main clauses. This is just a brush up of your understanding about grammar. So with that brief introduction, let us look at the formalism of constituent grammar. So the main formalism of this constituent sentences are context-free grammar. Is there a question? Do you have a question? So, you know, the study of grammar, the study of grammar started on 2000 years ago. So one of the, for example, the Panini, who was there in 2000 years ago, was a grammarist. But the type of grammar that Panini prescribed was a little different. We'll talk about that. That's called dependency grammar. And that was a very scientific grammar of Sanskrit and could be used for other languages. But for context-free grammar, the idea was first came in 1900, but it was formalized by Chomsky in 1956 and also independently by Backus in 1959. Now, a context-free grammar is used for defining constituent syntax. And formally, a context-free grammar comprises of set of rules or productions and a lexicon of words and symbols. We will talk about it. So you have the lexicon or the dictionary, the words, you know, which are called the terminal symbols of the words. And then you have the grammar rules. And the rules tell you how one constituent can be written in terms of other constituents or other terminal symbols. So a sentence is a sequence of terminal symbols which follows some, which can be derived from some rules, and we will look at that. So before we look at some examples, let us formally define a context-free grammar. So context-free grammar, we have a set of non-terminal symbols, which we also call constituents. For example, noun phrase is a constituent, verb phrase is a constituent, sentence is a constituent. We also have a set of terminal symbols. In the case of languages, when we look at the grammar, usually we can take the words as the terminal symbols. Then we have a set of rules or productions, and each rule is of the form A to beta. So what is A? A is a non-terminal symbol or one constituent. A is a single constituent, and beta is a string, is any arbitrary string comprising of n union sigma. So beta is a string defined on n union sigma. So we can say beta is a subset of sigma n union sigma star. That is, it is a string of symbols in a string, and the string can have either constituents or terminals. We'll give examples to make it clear. And we have S, we use S as a distinguished start symbol. It's a distinguished constituent. So S is a element of N. So this is what defines a context-free grammar. For example, we can write a simple context-free grammar like this. S goes to NP-VP, where S, NP, VP are constituents. We can write NP goes to noun, VP goes to verb, and then we can say noun goes to water, verb goes to rise, and we can put in other things like a noun goes to water, noun goes to air, and then we can have multiple meanings. So this water, air, dries, blows, these are examples of terminal symbols. Right? And N, V, NP, VP, S, these are our non-terminal symbols. And we have these 5 production rules, actually 7 production rules. For this production rule, the left side we have a non-terminal symbol S. The right side there is a string of 2 non-terminals. For this production rule, N goes to water. We have on the left side a non-terminal and the right side we have a terminal symbol. Is this clear, this definition?
Ma'am, can you please explain it again?
Can I please repeat the definition of context-free grammar?
Yes, ma'am.
So context-free grammar, we define it as follows. We have a set of terminals, right? In the case of language, the terminals are the words in the language. And we have a set of non-terminals, which are our constituents, such as noun phrase, noun, verb, adjective, preposition, phrase, sentence. These are our constituents or these are our non-terminal symbols or constituents. Okay. So we have 2 types of symbols, terminal symbols or words, which are there in the language, and non-terminal symbols which we define in order to define the grammar. But one non-terminal symbol we must have is S, which is the start non-terminal, which derives a sentence. Okay. Then the grammar is defined by a set of rules. Each rule has a non-terminal on the left-hand side, and the right-hand side is a sequence of symbols. And the symbols can be either a terminal or a non-terminal. Is this definition clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Let us look at an example. Before we look at an example, some more formal treatments. So, we say that we can define a language through the concept of derivation. Right? So we can say that, as I said, that there is a designated start symbol called S. So once we give the grammar rules of that grammar, if we can any string of terminals that we can derive starting from S, we can say belong to the language. So from S, starting from S, we can derive some string, and I will show how we can derive. And one string derives another. This is the definition of derives. If it can be rewritten as the second one by some series of rule application. For example, suppose I have S and I have this rule S goes to NPVP. Using this rule, from S I can derive NPVP. Suppose I have another rule which says NP goes to noun. So from this I can derive NVP. And suppose I have a rule N goes to water. Then from this I can derive water VP. Suppose I have a rule VP goes to verb goes to flows. So I can derive water verb and I can derive water flows. Because I am rewriting VP by verb and verb by flows. So from S, by this sequence of steps, I can derive water flows, which is a sequence of terminals. Then I say water flows belongs to the language. Is this definition clear?
Hello, ma'am.
Yes.
Ma'am, I can understand the contextual grammars, the definition, and it depends non-terminal, terminal, and some rules. Can you explain with a real-time example?
Yes, we will come to an example from English. First, I'm telling a simple example. Is the simple example clear?
Yes.
We'll come to more examples. So before I come to the examples, I just want to explain the notation. So suppose we have a rule A goes to beta. For example, S goes to NPVP is a rule, right? If this is a rule, and suppose I have a rule which says, you know, I have a rule. So suppose if this rule is there, suppose I have a string that S holds. Okay. Suppose I have this string. Now applying this rule, this string, I can do a derivation that NPVP holds. Okay. So this is my string 1 and this is my string 2. So from string 1, by applying this rule, we can derive string 2. Is it clear? So if A to beta is a rule, then the string alpha A gamma can be rewritten as alpha beta gamma by application of this rule, and this is called derivation. Is that okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, if alpha 1 is a string from which we can directly derive alpha 2 by application of a rule, and from alpha 2 we can derive alpha 3 by an application of a rule, and so on. From alpha m minus 1 I can derive alpha m by an application of rule. We can say from alpha 1 we can derive alpha m, and we can use this notation. So alpha 1 derives alpha m. So this is direct derivation. Direct derivation means from this string, by an application of a single rule, you can rewrite. And if by application of a sequence of rules you get something, we can say alpha 1 derives alpha m, which we write it as alpha 1 arrow star alpha m. So given this definition, we can define a language generated by a grammar. So G is a grammar, and the grammar is specified by these rules. Okay. For example, for a context-free grammar specified by these production rules, we can say LG. The LG is the language defined by the grammar. It is all strings that we can derive, all strings of terminals that we can derive starting from the start symbol S of the grammar. Is it clear? You write down all the grammar rules, and then from S, you find out what all strings you can derive. And that set of strings belong to the language. Okay. So there are two views of a grammar. One is starting from S, using the grammar rules, you can generate all sentences that belong to the language. The second thing is, if a sentence belongs to the language, you want to map this sentence. And if the sentence belongs to the language, there is a path of derivation from S to this sentence, at least one path. So if you can show how from S you have derived this sequence of words, that is called syntactic analysis or syntactic parsing. So there is a generative view of a language that starting from S, you can generate all the sentences. And the other is parsing, which given a sentence which belongs to the language, you show the derivation. by which you got this sentence. And this derivation can be expressed by a parse tree. Okay. So, as context-free grammar can be thought of in two ways. One is a device for generating sentences or derivation. The other is parsing, which is a device for assigning a structure to a given sentence. For example, this is another example of a simple grammar. NP goes to determiner nominal. NP goes to proper noun. Nominal goes to noun or nominal noun, which means there are two rules actually. Nominal goes to noun and nominal goes to nominal noun. And then we have determiner goes to a, determiner goes to the, noun goes to flight. So these are the rules corresponding to the lexicon or the dictionary. And these are the other rules which goes from constituents on the left hand side to strings of constituents on the right hand side. Whereas these rules, we have non-constituent on the left and terminals on the right. Okay. Any question? So can you tell me, suppose you take NP as your starts, right? And you have this grammar. Can you give some examples of strings that you can generate which belongs to NP given this grammar? I want some examples of strings belonging to NP.
The flight. NP goes to determinant and nominal. Determinant goes to the.
Okay.
Nominal goes to noun. Noun goes to flight.
I want more examples. Another example.
Similarly, ma'am, a flight can be generated.
Third example.
A ball.
No,
A
from
ball.
this grammar, there's no ball in this grammar.
Oh,
My
okay,
lexicon has only these three words.
The flight.
The flight. So that's example 3. Example 4.
The flight any number of means then flight any number of times.
The flight. A flight, right? So how many strings can you generate from this grammar?
Infinite.
So you can generate infinite number of strings because this rule is recursive. Nominal goes to nominal noun. And because of these recursive rules, right, that gives the power to the grammar and makes the grammar infinite and cannot capture the grammar by other machines like finite state operator.
Ma'am, can you just explain this D flight again by decomposing into the same noun phrase and construction?
The flight.
Yeah, anything, the flight or a flight.
So NP goes to determiner nominal.
Okay.
Now I apply the rule nominal goes to noun. So we can write by applying this rule free determiner noun. Then I apply determiner to a. So I can rewrite it as a noun.
Okay.
I use the rule noun to flight.
Okay.
So I get this derivation. So this is one way of derivation. I can better do this derivation by writing it like a tree. So I can write NP goes to determiner nominal. So determiner goes to a, and nominal goes to flight. Okay, so this is a tree structure.
Ma'am,
Yeah.
in this example, where is the terminal point?
Terminal is the flight. These are the three terminals in this grammar.
But
So,
we can derive more so many flight or
we can generate.
so many
The-
flight.
Yeah.
So where is the
Then we
terminal
have to add to the terminals. I'm just giving you a simple grammar. You can add more terminals, then you can get more variety.
Okay. Now, in this, how come the flight again leads to a flight? That's based on which rule?
Yeah, I will show you this. So let me take this flight.
Okay.
So then, so we have this rule: nominal goes to nominal noun. Okay, so I can write it as nominal noun. Okay, now noun goes to flight. I have a rule. I also have a rule that nominal goes to noun, so I can write it as noun, and then noun goes to flight. I can write it as flight, so I get a flight. Is this clear, or do I?
Okay.
Okay, because this rule, nominal goes to nominal noun. This nominal goes to, this noun goes to flight. This nominal also goes to noun. This noun goes to flight. By applying this nominal goes to nominal noun rule, we can get this.
But we were telling that this can be infinite also, right? Flight can keep on coming.
Yes, similarly, I can get a flight. I will show you. For example, here, after nominal, I can after nominal, I can again put, so I have put once, I said nominal goes to nominal noun. Again, I can say nominal goes to nominal noun. I can say this goes to nominal noun, and this goes to noun, right?
Okay.
So this noun can be flight, this noun can be flight, this noun can be flight. So I've got a flight.
Okay.
So it is because of this recursive rule, nominal goes to nominal noun.
Okay.
Now we'll come back to constituents grammar. I'll just briefly mention the other formalism, which is called the dependency grammar. And as I told you, this dependency grammar was first proposed by Panini, the Indian linguist, 2000 years ago. So the dependency structure shows which words depend on which other words. For example, suppose you take the word book, right? So this book, I want to find out what is the head of book. So I can say that so what is book related to? Which word is the word book related to?
Table.
So on the other side, so if you look at book is dependent. So what is the governor? So we can say put book. Okay. So put is the head and the book is the dependent. So we have both conventions. We can put dependent to head. I think that is the better. That is the more usual convention. So let me use that convention. So from the word book, I put an arrow to the head of this word. So the head is put. Okay. Then if you take the word, what is the head of put? What is the head of put? This is the main word in the sentence. In this word is the main word. So if I say that it is head is null, or we can say its head is sentence S. Okay. You take the word the. What is its head?
Book.
You take on. What is the head?
Table.
And there are different ways of looking at it. You know, actually, on the big table is a prepositional phrase. Some people put the preposition as the head. Some people put the table as the head. We'll do as you are saying. Suppose this is a preposition, so it qualifies this noun. What about the? What is the head of the?
Once again, table, ma'am.
Table. What about big?
Table.
Also table. Very good. And table, what is its head? What is the head of table?
Put.
So, there are
Room. Room.
You're right. I can say put the book on the big table. I'm asking you to put on the big table. Then the head of table is put. Right? Or if I say the book on the big table, I'm talking about the book which is already on the big table, then the head would be put. Right? There are ambiguities, but depending on the interpretation that you prefer, you decide what is the head.
But put also refers to the book, no, ma'am. So how can it be a head for the table?
No. So there are two things. I can, put. I'm saying put the book. And put what? Put the book. Put where? On the big table.
Okay. If you take where, yes, correct.
They come again? I could not
No,
hear.
I'm saying if you ask the question what, then it's book. But if you consider where, then it can be table.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that is what I'm saying. These are both table and book have the head as put, but the type of relation is different.
Okay.
Here, this is a direct object. The relation between put and book is direct object. Whether the relation between put and on the big table, this is a prepositional phrase. What is this relation? It is a prepositional relation. I can give some other name, but this is a prepositional relation. The relation is different. Okay, but this is also related. For example, table. On also has head as table, big also has a table, the also has head as table. Okay. So on to table, the relation is preposition to noun. The is determinant to noun. Big is adjective to noun. Right? In the room, again, in the room can refer to the table, could have been referred to other things. Suppose it's referred to the table, then in the room qualifies the table. And then I will put it this, and so on. Right? So this is the dependency structure of a sentence. So I will stop here today. We will resume tomorrow.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.